episode of the Coaching Cast podcast is brought to you in partnership with the brilliant Soulfully Single, founded by Julie Wild. Soulfully Single is the supportive, fun and empowering community for sociable singles who want to grow in confidence, reconnect with themselves and others, and use their single time to be the next best version of themselves. Soulfully Single aims to ease loneliness through community, connection and personal growth. So if you find yourself recently single or know someone who is, head over to www.soulfullysingle.co.uk to download a free workbook to help you heal and move on after the end of a relationship, or join one of the feel-good monthly coffee meetups. Hi, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Suzy, and this is the Coaching Cast. We are the No Nonsense podcast, chatting about the things impacting you at work right now, helping you to survive and thrive in today's workplace.
We discuss different topics each episode, sharing our ideas, hints and top tips from our experiences of working in the corporate world, running our own businesses and also being qualified coaches. We also try to have a few laughs along the way too, because taking yourself too seriously is just boring. We really hope you enjoy listening. In today's episode, we are thrilled to be welcoming a very special guest. We have Ted Hewett joining us. Ted is the Head of Business Development for the People Experience Hub, and we're chatting to him about employee engagement. So stay with us and enjoy. Amazing. Ted, welcome to the Coaching Cast. Suzy and I are thrilled to have you here to have this really exciting conversation, which actually Suzy and I have, I don't think, Suze, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been going 3 years on this podcast now, and I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
We haven't. This is a completely new topic for us.
Yes. Which in some ways is a bit mad considering what you and I do and all the things we talk about. So yeah. But hey, look, maybe we saved this conversation about employee engagement to have with an expert. And now we have one. So yes, super excited to have you with us, Ted. And so what I'd really like us to do to get us started is for you to just tell our listeners, who we affectionately call our CBBs, which stands for our corporate bullshit bashers, just a little bit about you and your story and how you got into employee engagement.
Yeah, sure. So hi, my name is Ted Hewett. I am the Head of Business Development for a company called the People Experience Hub. We help businesses with things like engagement surveys, people analytics. The science of creating great places to work is probably how I think about it, and helping businesses listen. Because that's very, very important. But I think it's probably worth noting for your CBBS that myself and Lisa, we used to work together. Back in the day, I was born in the energy industry, as it were. I began my career many years ago. And perhaps a good place to start my story in that sense. I joined British Gas when I think I was 21, 22, something like that. Like I like an absolute kid. And I never really intended to get into like a corporate job like that. It very much facilitated a lifestyle I was living where I was trying to be a professional musician on the side. And I meant I could come and go, do the 9 to 5 thing. And then I had evenings and weekends. And like, I think the one thing I learned about work back then was I thought it was hard and I didn't find it very rewarding. It was really just so I could get some money in the bank and pay my rent, eat. Things like, the things that human beings need to do. But it was really uninspiring. And even when I moved around to a couple of different businesses and moved to other energy companies, like, I just never really felt like it was purposeful or gave me a lot of meaning. And I just was like, there must be more to work. There must be more things within me or things that I can get from work that will drive me and make me want to do more and excite me and inspire me. And I was really fortunate. I had a bit of a, like not an early midlife crisis, but I kind of had a bit of a life reset and sold my car and quit my job and went traveling and did all that. And I came back and I was really fortunate. I ended up working for a company called Reward Gateway. Reward Gateway are a employee benefits company at its core, but they were so mission orientated. Their mission was to make the world a better place to work. And I was just like, I'm hooked. This is me. This is good. And I flew as well. And what it taught me and what I learned about is I didn't even know what employee engagement was, or like, I'd never heard of that term before. But as soon as I got into this business, not only was we were selling it candidly, like, so it was a benefits platform which has things like recognition and communication and things that create more engaging environments for people. But the actual company might like the way I felt, the feeling of being engaged was something I'd never experienced before. Like I think we were sort of alluding to before we started today. Like it can be very, very difficult to find in a business, and I was fortunate enough to find it and feel it. And I think once I felt it, it's like, yes, I want everyone should feel like this about work, and everyone should get excited. Like it was the opposite of the Sunday scaries. All of a sudden, I was like, I can't wait to go to work on Monday because I'm doing this amazing thing, working with amazing people in an amazing space, and like we're doing things that people had never done before, and it was just different. But that was sort of 7 years ago. Ever since then, I've been in the space. I've worked for a number of different, I like to call them good karma businesses. I like companies that do good in the world in some capacity, whether it's around financial well-being or therapy, or even just like how we communicate together. Like I've worked in a number of these different places, and I've landed up today at the People Experience Hub, helping businesses to listen and have that other side of the conversation.
Amazing. I love this. I love your energy talking about it, because that actually gives me so much energy. And to hear you so passionate about, yeah, working in a purposeful way. Because now don't get me wrong, I feel like this phrase gets used a lot, and it sounds in some ways, I think, I mean, it's just what it is. It sounds as fluffy as it is.
Yeah.
I think working in a purposeful way, it's fluffy because it hits you in the core. It's like right in here, it does hit you in the feels. That's what makes it actually as powerful as it is, because when you're working with your passion and aligned to it, it just feels awesome. And I think you
Yeah.
feel so much better and stronger and motivated, and you're energized. That is what it is. And
It's
all
like
the
the Daniel Pink thing, right?
yes, yeah,
Like autonomy, mastery, and purpose are the three things that drive people, I think, from that.
yes, yeah,
Um,
100%, yeah.
and like it's the autonomy and mastery are complex, and to do with your own feelings around growth and learning. But this idea of purpose and being connected with a mission, or like even just like a business's purpose. I always thought about like when I worked in big corporate and in the energy space, it was the company's mission was to make more money. And that's really uninspiring to me. I could see why that is a difficult environment to create engagement or to create roles and jobs that people want to do, because candidly, like it becomes a means to an end. And I was very fortunate. I worked in a technology space that was growing and booming and was really excited, especially sort of 7-8 years ago. The landscape of what employee engagement technology looked like was so new and radical. It was so cool. And not to say it's not cool now, but I think like the world has changed. A lot more people are doing it, and it's kind of grown up a bit, I think.
And I think it's being spoken about so much more now. But again, I think we're in the danger of that space of it gets talked about a lot. It becomes a bit faddy, a bit of the moment. And again, it's that, okay, it's great, it's got focus and attention, but what is actually happening about it? It's a bit like the whole well-being piece that I think is still around, and it's still really important. But I don't know if I feel hugely clear on, but what's actually changing and who's making a difference and how is it actually really positively impacting people. And like, don't get me wrong, it's complicated because everyone's well-being is different in terms of what it's driven by. And I think engagement in some respects is similar in terms of what I find particularly engaging isn't necessarily for another person. What I love about working for a company isn't necessarily the same for somebody else. But I think that's where trying to focus in on the individual, having that awareness and doing some of their own thinking about this kind of thing and helping them to actually, going back to your point about autonomy, having autonomy in the decisions they're making about their own intentions at work and why they show up every day is actually really important. And I think that's true in that well-being space as well. I tell you what, I pulled loads of faces during your introduction, and I'm going to explain them to anyone who was like watching, just if you want to understand where that's coming from. It was mainly because Ted was talking about how old he was in 2011, and I was thinking, oh my God, how old did that make me when you started in 2011 then? And the massive age gap that exists between us, because
Fine.
you're still so youthful, Ted. And I was thinking, oh my gosh,
Ah,
you were only 21 when we started working together.
but
Look at
Lisa,
you now.
age is just a number.
That
It's
is
fine.
true.
Just a
100%.
number.
So let's talk more about employee engagement then. So, like, how would you define what it actually is, and why is it different, or even is it different to employee satisfaction?
Yeah, it's a huge can of worms to open this one, because employee engagement.
Okay.
So, like, the definition of engagement is what has been a mystery and continues to be a mystery, because you've hit the nail on the head when you were saying before, like, different. If you think about you engaging with a thing, some people are just more interested in other things than others, right? So creating a universal catch-all term for it is really difficult. Much like talking about company culture, employee experience, employee satisfaction, like, they're kind of different lenses for this catch-all term that work has created around it. So, like, my understanding of employee engagement, it was really the term itself was really born from the hospitality industry. And it starts off with great customer interactions in the States, like back in the sort of 70s and 80s, where they started to understand that people wanted a better customer experience. As we kind of drive it forwards, I think it has become and maintains to be in this catch-all term for, like, people's experience of work. So, like, you'll hear, like, in my world, people talk about engagement surveys all the time. What they're really meaning is, like, I want to know how people feel. And what they're not meaning is, like, I want to understand about how they interact with this particular element of their work. Like, engagement is just one track. And as you touched on, some of the other ones could be like well-being, it could be trust, it could be collaboration, it could be community. There are lots of different things. There's a few definitions I do like, though, that are really useful. There's one I really like, actually, from a guy called Glenn Elliott, that I was rereading this morning because I wanted to get it dead right. There's the sort of great ways to define it. An engaged employee will make better decisions. An engaged employee will be more productive, and an engaged employee will innovate more. And I think those three things actually catch it really nicely, and is generally what I think people are talking about. People are looking for people to be more productive. They want them to make better decisions, harder decisions in the moment. They want people to find that innovative solution. I mean, when we first met, Lisa, I was working in contract excellence, which was like the entire point of the team, right? It was like, how do we find little bits of innovation where we can either do better service or save money in some kind of supply chain way? And I think that's really, really true. Now, the issue that brings up, though, is that businesses have become really, really focused. And actually, as you said before, like, people talk about engagement all the time, and, like, oh, engagement is the thing we should be striving for. And I always challenge people with this and be like, well, why? What is the output that you actually want from your people, from your business, from your product, whatever it is? What is the goal you're trying to drive? And you may find that engagement is like a hygiene factor as part of that. You might find that, and you could look at it. I'd say, actually, you could look at things like employee satisfaction in the same way. Like, it is just another term for some kind of measure and some kind of metric against where we want people to be in terms of feelings. So I don't know if that's a helpful start, but, like, defining it is really, really tricky. I'm not even sure engagement is the right thing for most businesses. Like, if you're working in hospitality or retail or something where, like, customer interaction is king, CX is absolutely at the forefront, then yeah, you want people who are, like, engaged with the product. They are knowledgeable, they're curious, they want you to have a good experience. But when I think about, like, somewhere like a manufacturing plant, actually things like health and safety come first. It's not about, you want everyone to go home with the same amount of fingers and toes. If you listen to someone at Selco, that's all they talk about. Like, that becomes the thing. And actually that focus on taking care of oneself becomes the essence of engage, and the quality of the end product. Like, have we made this thing to the right standard? Are we reducing our wastage? All those sort of things. So I'd argue that engagement isn't always the thing people seek, but I think it has become the term that people drive for. And I think on the bigger picture, when people talk about, like, culture and how businesses are, that's the two things really sort of merge and mesh together. Like, I think people say we have a highly engaged workforce, therefore we have a good culture, would be an example. And it's not always that simple. I think culture is, again, just a messy term in a business sense that doesn't really work properly and has sort of been bastardized a bit around, and it just gets really, really complicated.
No, I think it's so interesting. And I think you hit the nail on the head pretty much straight away when you said it's about businesses deciding what actually they want to achieve and understand, sorry, first, and then achieve. Because otherwise it just feels a bit too, and I think this was my experience from all the organizations actually I've ever worked in, is that it felt like they did it because they thought they should do it. not because they actually wanted to do it. Yeah, believed in it, wanted to do it, or had a real intention for what they were going to do with it. Because nearly everywhere I've ever worked, when we've done an employee engagement survey, I don't think I've ever seen a huge amount happen off the back of it, other than a communication around what those results were, what the move was compared to the year before, and some thoughts about why that could be. But I don't think I've ever seen much in respect of, so how are we going to utilize this to make decisions? And a lot of the time, I don't think they could have ever done that, because I don't think they were insightful enough. I don't think the data points were necessarily the right ones. I don't know how, Suzy, I don't know if you had this experience as well, because we did work for the same employer, but I remember one time there was a particular statement or question within one of the surveys we used to have to complete that everyone interpreted differently. So it meant then that everyone scored it differently.
Yep.
And it used to flummox a lot of the senior team. And we used to end up spending more time debating. And this wasn't necessarily directly in the team you and I worked in. I think it happened in a wider team I was in. But we spent more time debating how we think people had interpreted it than anything else. And I was like, I kept thinking, I don't think this was the point of this. But that's kind of my experience. Suzy, I don't know what yours is. Like, I don't know how, you know.
Yeah. So my experience has been somewhat similar, but also actually just bringing a different lens into it. You know, I was a leader of quite a substantial sales team. And we obviously, as you've said, like we did engagement surveys and things like that with the team. And my results, I'm just gonna like sing my own praises here. So my results were the best.
Of course they were.
Actually, I think in the UK business, definitely in sales, I remember. So yeah, just kudos to me there. That's why I now do what I do. No.
Big time.
But
sign up to Suzy Sales Coaching now.
But the reason I mention that is because I remember that like nobody came and asked me what I did. So how have you got to this point? What do you do? Like, how do you approach it? Like, I'm just interested in your ideas, because your results are, you know, and I got rewarded for those, and my team got rewarded for those extremely high results. But actually, no one ever came with the curiosity to understand how I got there. And I think that's more, and I remember in the moment being like, that's more of a reflection around the intent behind this than actually the number itself and where we actually plotted and where we got to in terms of the result, like on data, because actually they didn't want to know, they didn't want to understand how I got there. And I wasn't saying I was a finished article and I couldn't do different things, learn more myself, of course. But actually, as a starting point, I was like, surely other people who aren't finding this as natural or are a bit like, how do I actually do this, would seek that knowledge out. And that just never happened. And it just it came out, it just kind of lends itself into the point you made there, which is around the authenticity and the intent behind it.
It's so true. So sadly, I see this a lot. Like, it's really, really common. We combat this with things like internal benchmarking. So, like, you know, people who work with us would absolutely see that, and we'd be like, go talk to this person. There'll be gold here. You should find that. But like the truth of it is, you're right. I think a lot of the time, and like this may sound really cynical, but businesses and business leaders, and they think like we have to separate. You can't just talk about businesses generally because it's people. There are people underneath the hood of these companies, right? C-suite, senior leadership, whatever you want to call it, top level of management in your business. They've generally read an article or heard that employee engagement will unlock certain features, whether that is innovation, productivity, or a discretionary effort, whatever it is, right? They like, oh, we want this. And then they go, well, that's HR's thing, typically. And so HR go, well, you know, we can run a survey, we can ask, we can start to figure it out. So HR go and do the survey and start to run the people analytics, or like they'll go and run some focus groups. Maybe they'll start up something like a champions network or like a listening group, whatever you want, like loads of different mechanics for like doing the listening piece. Yeah, Lisa remembers because I was part of the engagement champion network.
Yeah, you were. And no disrespect to you on this, but like, this is exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about. But carry on. I don't want to interrupt. No, you're right. It just makes me laugh about this champions network because again, and you can tell firsthand because you were part of one. How empowered did you feel to actually create any change?
Can you remember what we talked about all the time?
No.
Car parking. Car
Car
parking.
parking.
That was all
Yes.
it was. It was discussing car parking. Like, it was absolute, and like, but this is it's a symptom of the bigger problem, because
You're
so
so
there is,
right. I forgot about the car
Suzy,
parking. Oh
I
my
know,
God.
it comes up all the time. Like, you're dead right. The intent there isn't to make widespread change. The intent is to drive an outcome. And I think that, and this is the problem, is
Forgot about
they
that.
go, we want this outcome, but we don't want to make an internal change. Now, if you then break down, so like one of the other things I find really useful about looking at engagement is looking at some different models around like what it means. There's lots of different ways. We have a measurement framework for it in our work. Like, engagement is an outcome on our kind of framework. But for this, I'm going to use actually the reward gateway one, because it's really good. It's called the engagement bridge. And it's got like something like 10 different facets of it, of all the different things that make up someone's world of work, something like management, leadership, trust, pay and benefits, like all those things are in there. But things like job design is in there, which, like, how is your world actually architectured? How does your job sort of function? And yet that's a huge part of how you're going to feel about your job. I remember I was thinking about this morning. I remember there was a team at Opus that was impossible to recruit people in, because I was junior admin role. It was all about just inputting data from one spreadsheet into another, like something that in today you'd be like, I'll just get an LLM or some automation to do it, and away we go, right? But back then couldn't do that, and it was so hard to get people in this team, and it was because the job was crap and really badly paid. Like, it was a hard job with rubbish pay, with a crap manager. No one wanted to stay and do it, and it was just, and yet the business was unwilling to make the effort to make the change, because it was a cultural problem that they had underneath the hood. It wasn't actually a case of, well, this job doesn't work, or it has to be this way, it's going to be too difficult to fix. They just didn't want to spend the money on hiring a developer to solve a problem that a team of 15 was combating every single day. And yet that would have been like, if you were being really like engagement focused about it, you'd go, okay, well, let's actually look at the design of this role. Let's see, like, what are the components that make it suck. Let's look at the things that don't. Let's do some kind of mapping process around what are some of the things we can automate, some of the things we can improve on. And like, it's a lot of work. And I think the reality of it is that business leaders want the outcomes easy, and they want to go for the low hanging fruit. And it is often more palatable to go, you know what, I'm going to buy some software. I'm gonna put in a benefits program. I'm gonna put in a recognition platform that's gonna move the needle a bit. It might not do all the things, but it'll be enough. And I think the truth, having worked at these sorts of vendors, like, yeah, like I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it doesn't work in and of itself. Technology is not employee engagement. Buying an engagement platform doth not make an engaged workforce, I'm afraid. Which is probably bad sales for me to say that.
Yeah, quick. No, but you're part of the package. So, that's not entirely, your investment isn't just entirely in the tech. You get you and your team as well.
Well, you guys got to tell the truth about it as well, because people, there's so much work to be done, and it's hard. It is, like, again, HR gets this view of it's pink, it's fluffy, it's, oh, let's do a mental health awareness little poster campaign with some webinars and maybe some yoga and like all this kind of stuff, or breathing exercises, and like all these things are great. Like, they're not, don't want to devalue them, but they don't make for like an engaged work. Like, again, if engagement is what you're seeking, so I think hospitality is the easiest one to look at. You've got, like, if you want people to have great customer experiences, you need engaged employees at the front. It's a very different experience when you go to like a little bistro. Actually, the little cafe around me, which is family run, is amazing, because you go in there and they're just warm and they're friendly. It's because they're really bought into it. It's their world that they've created. Whereas I go to the Subway around the corner, which I don't go to very often, and they're like, it's not that they don't care, they just feel very differently about it. The experience is different.
Yeah.
You're seeking different things.
Yeah. And the connection for those people is completely different. And it's not that just because one is, I'm making a massive assumption that one is family owned, family run. So of course they'll be closer to it because it's theirs. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you can really truly care about something even if you're not in direct ownership of it. I know I always have in workplaces that I've been in, no, I didn't own Centrica. I mean,
No.
damn it. If I had, we'd be having a very different conversation, I tell you.
Look at all that. There's Glenn actually, and so the definition of employee engagement, he actually there's a bit about like how you would define someone as engaged. And I really like this. There's another 3. So someone who is engaged understands and believes in the direction of the organization. they understand how their role affects and contributes to the organization's purpose, mission, and objectives, and they genuinely want the organization to succeed. And I think that's true. I think those are really useful. Like
Yeah.
I think about my little business that I work for now. There's only 10 people work there. I really want it to succeed. I understand what we're doing. It's probably why I'm so engaged with it, because I can see all the moving parts, and every time we do something, you can see it. When you work at somewhere like Centrica, it's going to be so much harder to have that feeling and have those experiences, because you just can't. Like, you can't see across 150,000 people. Like, it
No.
doesn't work like that. So you have to
Yeah.
work much harder at some of the other factors, like job design, like leadership, like even pay and benefits. Like, get that stuff right, and
Yeah.
that will take you a lot further.
Yeah, I think in all jobs you've got to get the foundation right and satisfy people's basic needs. If you can't get that right, you're never going to get anything beyond. But I think if you can get that nailed, then it's all about tapping into the rest, like the motivations and the energies and the purpose. And I think you can still be in a huge corporate and be purpose-led and driven. You
100%.
absolutely can. And it's just about being supported to even be thinking like that in the first place. Even if actually your main driver to going to work is because you're supporting your family and you want to enable them to be safe, healthy, to grow. If you've got kids, you support their education. That's still being purpose driven. But it's whether people connect it in that way and they're even supported too. And I do think what you said in that quote, that you took the 3 points, that piece about recognizing the role that you're in and the impact and contribution it has is so important. But I think it's one of the biggest things I see being left disconnected for people, that they don't, especially in a big corporation, they become too siloed and all they see is what they do on a day-to-day and don't make the connection, and they're not helped again, and it's not transparent and it's not collaborative enough in their wider organization for them to understand why, although it may feel only like a small part, how incredibly important it is to the whole, entirety of what's happening.
That's why you need the purpose, mission, and values stuff. Like, again, sounds really pink and fluffy. It sounds marketing led. Actually, it really sounds like the kind of thing you just want to put on a poster. Like, oh, this is why we exist. It's really important, and it is. Like, it is kind of that. Like, and sometimes it is written by marketing teams, and unfortunately, that's where it tends to go a bit wrong, because you'll come up with some great slogan that like, your customers would like. I tell you the best example, and I talk about this mostly because it's our old employer. Before British Gas, there was Enron.
Yeah.
One of Enron's core values was integrity. I always find that really
The
funny.
joke. Yes, the
Yeah,
absolute joke of it.
and I see it all the time. I see it in corporates today still, and not just corporate, like businesses across the UK are still using integrity as one of their core values, and it's on their website. You see it in accountancy a lot. And yeah, great. That's nice that you put that there, but like, it just kind of feels a bit obvious at this point that of course I want my accountants to use integrity. Like, that's really important. Yeah, it's so that's not giving like an individual purpose, is it? Like,
No.
that's very much like that just is like what we expect from when we interact with other businesses. We look at something a bit more. The one again, I just keep using Reward Gateway. Actually, no, I'll use my own company, the People Experience Hub, which is we've got 4 values. One of them is, and one I use all the time, is be brave. Like, where you just, and it's simply because I will often we're trying things, we're experimenting, we're a small company. Every time we make a decision or have a punt on something, like, it feels risky. Us going to a trade show is terrifying, because like the cost expenditure for a company of our size is it's terrifying, that if it's not going to pay itself back, or it's not going to go well, or anything like that. But like, actually, we've come to the conclusion that we're never going to succeed if we just sit and worry about it all the time. And actually, we've got to be doing stuff. So being brave is a really, really important part. And it's not, this is where like things like values, mission, vision can't just be things that you write on the wall. They have to be things that you live and do. And I think this is maybe where this engagement thing, and one of my core beliefs around it, is to do with role modeling and leaders. Like, it's not just about what they say, it's how they behave around this stuff. Like, if you can't even get that stuff on board. So if someone, and again, comes back to intent, what you were saying before, Suzy, if the intent is to have an engaged workforce, yet I'm not going to change my behavior as a senior leader to encourage that kind of behavior, then how can we possibly achieve it?
Amen.
And
Preach.
And I think as well, it's about, I use this term quite a lot in my work, and I feel like I've used it more frequently, but also having like adult to adult conversations, adult to adult interactions, adult to adult experiences. adult to adult expectations, the list goes on. And I think this is the same with what we're talking about here, which is around creating engagement and whatever that looks like for the individual, but it is also respectful of the fact that, you know, we are all adults often.
Not everyone in work legally has to be. You have to be 18.
Exactly.
Just say it.
Exactly. And you know, there's something that comes with that, which is around just treating everybody as an adult. And I think, you know, I still find it now when I come across scenarios or situations out of this context around engagement, but in general, where that isn't in play, because I just think, well, then of course you're going to get X reaction. Of course you're going to get X response, because that's how you've gone into it, thinking about, you know, to your point, the outcome. And it's really, really fascinating.
The parent-child dynamic at work is really, really interesting. And it's something I've certainly looked at a few times throughout my career, because it's too weird. And it's even weirder because you've got then the parent in this scenario acknowledges that there is the employee, the child, as it were, is clearly capable of so much more thought and trust and all those sorts of things, and yet it seems to not happen, and we forget that people just get. So you can break it into these micro moments, and it is about the little things. I think but human beings and people will always remember the way. They don't remember what you say; they remember how you made them feel, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is, again, like the engagement thing, like a well-engaged employee. It's not that they never have a bad experience at work. It's that they feel, even when they have tough conversations with their manager, they feel supported. And that's a great, and that feels really, again, sounds obvious, but I never had that experience until I worked like in technology. Not to badmouth the energy industry, but it just did not exist in the way, like we couldn't have had those conversations. I had good bosses. They weren't bad people. They just didn't have the infrastructure around them to create an environment where they could treat me like an adult. They were the processes that were put in place were really complex, convoluted, just hard work. Like it didn't make a good experience for them or me. I was hard to manage, and they were hard managers in that sense.
Yeah. And I think in some of those traditional corporate environments, they're so hierarchical. And I think that has a tendency to, if people don't consciously do something different and behave differently, to encourage parent-child conversations.
Yeah.
And I think there is also then that additional mix of the element of control. And I do think actually when leaders themselves don't feel able to be autonomous, and that does happen too often, you can be in a senior position and still feel completely powerless. Because if you're not being supported well, you're not going to behave great either, if you're not able to have that, you know, real self-awareness and capability and resilience. And it's really bloody tough when you're in a senior position and you're under pressure to be able to even do any of that, to be able to stop and think, actually, how is my behavior just mirroring my terrible experience, and I'm just passing that on to other people. And actually, I think in those moments when even senior people feel vulnerable and exposed, it's a control, like land grab situation, where then unfortunately you just get that parent-child dynamic just gets so much worse.
But then you look at it the other way around. We've got, so like, you're familiar with Timpsons, probably?
Yes. Oh my God, I'm reading loads about the CEO of Timpsons.
Have you read Ask John, the book?
No, I haven't.
It's
so
great.
I saw him speak at TEDx Manchester last month.
Wicked.
So I know this very well.
Timpsons are a phenomenal employee engagement story. You'll feel it if you go in any of the whether it's in the Sainsbury's or we've got one in the little town square here. Like they are people who care.
Yeah,
and like
they
when
do.
you read the book, the way he talks about it is, so like first off they have like a bottoms up hierarchy. So at a local level, people are empowered to make decisions about their own stores, how it works and how they operate it. Which, I mean, it just sounds a bit like, duh. That's such an obvious play for a retailer in any environment. Like, you know, work with your local audience because they're the people who give you the money. He's got very few rules. Like, there's only a couple of rules in there. One of them's like dress appropriately and put money in the till. That's it. Like, they're really, really straightforward. And then they create this culture. They've never spent a penny on marketing. They've just done it all through word of mouth. Like, I'm sure you've heard all this shtick before, right? But it's a very powerful story because they have created engagement, I would say, as an outcome, but they were not shooting for engagement. They were shooting for, like, I want to make a place to work that's actually going to function and work properly. They had like business objectives that have been created through cultural transformation and change, and like actually an open-minded leader. And that's when I think about this, the challenges that every company faces around like getting people to feel, if you want to call it engagement, whatever it is, retention or trust or innovation or any of those, whatever your outcome is, like you've got to look at the top first about how willing you are to go on a journey to figure out, like, what do people really want? How can we help them? How can we listen to them and talk back to them? And it's what you said at the beginning, Lisa. How can we demonstrate that we have listened and we've done a change? We can't just say, "Oh, well, thanks for that. Just tell me again." Like, it doesn't work. I think so. That's the other side. I think of it. It's like, how do you create a great space? I think it is about doing big, brave things and enabling people to do great work, like through I'll call it through policy, but actually through culture. I think that's probably a better way to think about it.
I feel like there's so much great stuff going on here. I'm feeling like buzzy in my brain about how many great things. To be honest, the first thing I've been thinking about since we talked about Timpson was how wonderful the Timpsons was in Witney when I used to live there in Oxfordshire, and how they used to like put additional holes in my belts. Yeah, people, you heard that right. Additional holes to make my belt smaller.
Nice.
For free. And every time the guy would be like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." I'd be like, no. I'll pay. He's like, "Just contribute to my charity box."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to be like, what a dude. Every time he did it, I'd be like, "You're so nice. You're so
It
kind."
happened to me. I went in. So this watch, my family bought me this for my 30th, and the battery was flat, and I wanted to wear it for my wedding last year. Took it down, and they were like, "Oh my God, I'll sort that out. We'll do the battery for free. Don't worry." And I was just like, amazing. Like, I mean, I trust someone in the pot, like, yeah, for exactly that. Like, it was just a tiny act of kindness, but
Yes.
it made me feel amazing. And like, this is it, isn't it? Right. So in that instance, you're trying to drive a great customer interaction, so you've enabled someone at a local level to make a good decision, and like, there it is. They were empowered to do so. They were like the role modeling told them to do it. All the conditions, the infrastructure was. You can break it down into a science. But ultimately, it is about decision making at the top that trickles down the hill.
Yeah. We touched upon there the CEO of Timpson, and there's, even if I stand in as the cynic for a moment,
Please.
There will be the naysayers that go, well done, Timpsons, it worked for you. But I can't see how that would work for me. And I have to admit, there's even a part of me having, I've run a hospitality business. I've been the owner of hospitality business. My husband will say differently because he's technically the owner. But hey, look, when you're married, what's his is mine.
Exactly.
And I think there is a part of me that's thinking practically, but how do you actually put some of this stuff in place, and how do you do this? And like, you've talked through a couple of those traits in leadership that are necessary for strong engagement. But like, what would you offer to those who are out there going, "Yeah, but how do you actually make this possible? How do you create, as a leader, an engaged workforce?" What would you say you've seen that's worked?
Yeah, there's a really good example. I can think of two companies I think have done a really good job of this. One is a company called Cooper Parry, who are an accountancy firm. They are a really cool accountancy firm, which I know sounds like tough sell. Their brand and marketing is extraordinary, but the actual people who work there, that's what makes it tick. They have done it through so Aid, the CEO, Aid Cheatham. He went through a real journey of like joining this business where it was all people white dudes in their 50s wearing suits, and he came in his 30s and was just like, this is not the business I want to work for. So he's gone around, he's spent an awful lot of time listening, so like thinking about it, and also ultimately leading by example and building this. So I'll give you a really easy example. I remember he does a talk about the origin of, or like the rebirth of Cooper Parry as it grew. And it comes after a time after the economic crisis. And there is literally him stood in the middle of a room full of people in suits, and a big slide comes up behind him and it just says, "Oh, fuck." And like, all of a sudden, like, but it was the way he speaks to people, it was the way he wanted people to, not swearing, but like in real terms. He talked to people that was an adult to adult conversation from that point onwards. And everyone internally speaks the same way. It is not about being crass or anything. It's actually about like, we're just talking like grown-ups here. We're having grown-up conversations. So they don't live in suits all the time, and they don't have to be in the office 5 days a week in order to demand X amount of productivity. Like, what they want, what they've done, and what he has gone about doing from a leadership down perspective is actually creating a business where someone in their 20s and 30s and 40s would actually want to work. So he's really put himself in the position of like when he joined the business, what would I have wanted to see, and what ultimately do I want to build like for my kids and stuff. I say the other one example I really like is a friend of mine, is a lady called Deborah Ward. She built this company, or used to be the managing director of a company called Cam and Hooper. It's a hospitality business in London. They've got I think they had like 6 venues at a point. A couple of hundred people work there. And her whole thing was about like, how can I get people to bring their full selves to work? Because we know that when our people show up being themselves, because we've hired great people, our clients love it. And so she worked so hard. And like for her, like it was easy. I say easy, a couple of hundred people is not a small amount of people, but she went and spoke to everyone and started to understand the full people. And so I'll give you some examples where where they were going to hire artists to do a big mural in the business. They got employees who do art to come and do it. Where they where they wanted musicians for gigs for some of their venues, they would get employees who are in bands to come and do it and do the music. And like getting people, like even from people who wanted to like learn a bit more about social media, who might have been a pot washer, like great, get them in. Let's train them up. Let's get them engaged with how we do things and how we teach social and how we do marketing and all those sorts of things. And it became a lot more about looking at, again, they're in the experience game, so they were really looking to tap into their employees' experiences to pass back on to the customer, and it created this amazingly engaged like workforce. And I went to I used to go to their places a lot when I lived in London. One was right opposite my office, and like every time it was just smiles, sunshine, easy. Like you felt like you knew Pablo and Rick and all those sorts of people, right? You just kind of got it. So I think and both of those examples for me come down to active listening, not just listening,
Yeah.
active listening to what people are saying to you about what is their problems. I think, have you ever heard the expression, it was for the Queen, but I'll say the King. The King thinks the world smells like fresh paint.
Oh no, I've never heard this before.
You never heard that expression?
No,
So,
Suzy's nodding. Suzy's heard
Yeah,
it.
I
yeah.
have. Yeah,
So like, because obviously everywhere the King goes, they've just painted.
they've just painted it. So it's not
Right.
the real life
They don't
scenario, the reality of
really.
every day.
Got
I
it.
think one of the challenges leaders have is they think the world smells of fresh paint to them. They have a great experience of work, like they get the great parking spot. People are nice to them in reception. For real, I'm not joking. It's true. But people, when the CEO of Centrica stands in a lift and someone medium to junior stands in there with them, only one of them's nervous. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like, so you have to, as a senior leader, you really have to try hard to actively listen to what people are saying, how they feel, not just the words that they're saying, but the sentiment behind it and the way in which they think. So yeah, that's that. And outside of that, then it's being really authentic about your follow through on this. It can't just be, oh well, I want to retain people, therefore we're going to do this. It has to be bigger than that. You've got to go. Your why, your core, why are we doing this, needs to be very much in line with your people agenda, not just your business agenda.
Yeah, it's so true. What do you think? I suppose the question for me about a lot of this stuff is like, especially when we're talking about it, is like this feels so obvious, and maybe it feels so obvious because of, Suzy, I'd be intrigued to know what you think about this, but like it feels obvious because we're talking about, I think, doing the right thing, truly trying to work well with other people and get strong results in doing that, and having a workforce. Now, I think it sounds really obvious because everything you've said makes so much sense. And it also feels really obvious because of how important this topic is to me and how much I know it affected me and how engaged with it all I was when I worked for various different organisations. And yet, if it was that obvious, wouldn't we all just be nailing it? But we don't. And we don't get it right and we keep getting it wrong. And we wouldn't need experts, surely, if it was just so easy to do. So what gets in the way, from your experience, from businesses getting this stuff right? Or even, yeah, I think that's the right thing to say rather than doing it well. I just mean like getting it right.
I mean, this is without me wanting to be like too much of a hippie about it, it's the great challenge of capitalism. Like your objectives are always going to be to do with cash and revenue, and like because this is the thing, and maybe this is one of the hard things about like working in the good karma industry or whatever you want to call it. Like the reality of it is the only reason any of us are here is to earn money. The baseline of it, like I would not, I love my job. I love working for the People Experience Hub. But if Nick turned around to me, my boss turned around to me and said, I'm really sorry, I can't pay you for the next year, I'm not going to do it. And that's nothing to do with purpose, mission. You know, that's just, it's hygiene factors, Maslow's hierarchies of needs.
Yeah.
I have a need to pay my mortgage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this is the challenge: is we in a capitalist world where businesses only exist because of money and to generate revenue in some capacity, however altruistic or good they might be, however mission and vision orientated they might be. The truth and the underlying premises of it is to do with cash. So unfortunately, there is always going to be that kind of push-pull factor and this sort of dichotomy between what we want and the world of work we try and create versus the reality of what it is. And I think that gets in the way, which is why, like, I hear this all the time, particularly from HR people, because it's who I talk to. But like, we've had our budgets cut for engagement programs. We've had our L&D budget slashed. We can't bring in any new technologies because of X, Y, and Z. And I particularly the last few years, right? Cost of living, everything's getting more expensive. Rents have gone up. Actually, a really good one is this return to the office thing. That's a great way of thinking about it at the moment. Everyone wants everyone back in the office because the offices cost so much money. But is that really the best place for people to be and for them to have the best place of work?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's like, you can't park you could just ignore that and go, well, the money's not important because it's about employee experience. And then you go, yeah, but we're spending the money. Like, so like, do we stop spending the money and get rid of the office because we don't want that either? And like, it's a really complicated, like, an unbalanceable equation in my mind. Like, until the root of all evil, cash, as it were, until that's out of the equation will never balance.
So on that note,
Mm.
knowing that that's the truth of it, and I think that's really important. No, I think that's fair to say, in all honesty. Like, let's be real about it. The three of us are quite, well, not quite. I would say we are very real, authentic people. I don't think any of us are disingenuous. I know Suzy and I work so hard, especially in what we do with coaching and training and supporting people, to be real in all of that and say, you know, we're not saying any of this stuff that we're talking about is easy. We're saying it's the truth. So how can we make it possible for you and enable you to just do a little bit more of something that feels better than what you're doing right now? We're not saying we're going to fix everything, but I think on a line to that, what would you offer, Ted, in the true nature of the coaching cast and the way we tend to conclude our conversations? What would you offer as your like top tips for people who are listening around how they can, you know, boost and create sustainable employee engagement?
Yeah. So outside of like asking the question, is it engagement, which I think is, I would encourage anyone listening to this, if you're on that journey, like just have a real think about the outcomes you're looking to drive. Like,
Yes.
and you know, like there is tons of models you could look at. I mean, we've got one that's called PX3. Feel free to look it up. But like, there's tons of others that I would recommend having a look at out there. The three things I think about, though, realistically, about engagement in this world, number one would be listening. So like, listen to your people, listen, or like, it's more than half of a conversation. Take that feedback, relay it back, but you just really take it on board and try and put yourself in the position of someone who isn't you. I think which is very difficult to do, but equally needs doing. I think the second one there is empathize. Like, you really need, as part of that listening, you really need to empathize with where people are coming from and the worlds that they live in, and recognize how different they're going to be. Especially if I'm talking to, like, if you're a senior leader, even like just a people manager, like the people underneath you are having a very different experience to you of work, and just understanding that there even is a spectrum of what those experiences are is a great step forward. And then my last one is about reaction and how you respond to these stuff. And I would just, again, encourage anyone who can, if you have the ability to make some of the hard changes, to do it. Take a step back and have a look at your job design. Like, have we got the right roles, and are they architectured in the right way? Are we willing to put in the work to restructure our pay and benefits in such a way that's actually going to be fair and equitable? Have we got the right policies in place for people when they come back from maternity leave? All of those, they feel like hygiene factors, and they feel just like very much like business as usual stuff, but they're so important because they directly impact how people's experience of work is. And today, it's never been easier to capture the feedback, but it's never been harder to action. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does
So
make sense.
taking the time and like really focusing on what that action is going to be. So like, and maybe the last thought, like if you're to anyone out there running an engagement survey, like if you can't do anything about the problem, maybe think about not asking the question.
Oh, bloody hell. Yeah, that's a toughie, that one to
Mic
end
drop.
on.
Mic
Drop.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's on a stand, so you'll just have to imagine it.
That's what you should have offered to British Gas when we were arguing over parking. That would have been a good one. Don't ask the question about parking, people, if there's literally nothing you're going to do about it. Slash,
Hilariously, that
you
was what we
can't
talked about.
you can't expand the parking because the site you bought is specifically knowingly too small for all the employees that you have.
So, there you go.
I used to get up, right, and like you must have done this. Well, no, you might not have done this, but I was one of many who got up at the crack of dawn to get to work an hour earlier just to make sure I got a parking space at the office.
I mean, it was
Wow.
shameful that I used to do that because I actually lived about a 10-minute walk away from
Ted, you were contributing to the problem in the
Yeah,
employee engagement committee,
100%
honestly,
was.
and you could have
Yeah.
walked.
I should. It would have been better for my health. A lot of other things. But,
I love this. I completely forgot. You've literally enabled me to relive like one of my favorite memories and some of the most heated conversations / like Q&A sessions that we used to have in front of the execs when this came up. I've got literal like visual images of people standing up and like shaking a fist at our like director over the lack of parking spaces.
like a
It's so
standing
funny.
item. Every ECN meeting was like, okay, number one, the car parking, and just the collectors like, ugh.
Everyone's just energy being sucked out of them, and
That's so
like,
good.
oh.
I forgot you even had an acronym, the ECN.
The ECN,
Oh
yeah.
God, those were the days. Look at you now. Good God.
I know.
Let's be grateful and appreciative of that experience you had, Ted, because you wouldn't be where you were now without it.
100%.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ted. This has been such an awesome conversation. I've really loved it. It's been absolutely brilliant, and I feel really confident that our CBBS will have enjoyed it as much as we did. So thank you so much. So Ted, if they want to learn more about you, connect with you, I've noticed this recently, I'm going to say this for you, you are a top employee engagement voice on LinkedIn these days.
Stop
He
it.
is.
I can see why.
He has a badge. You've got a badge. I feel like this is new. Is it new, your badge?
It is new. The badge is new, but the content is old. No, follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the easy place. I love talking about not just employee engagement, but life and work and kind of everything in between. I promise I am not one of those cookie cutter ChatGPT generating content people. You will hear unashamedly my opinion, and that's how it's going to be.
That's brilliant. No, people can find you there and learn a bit more as well about the People Hub experience as well.
People Experience Hub, yes.
I've got it the wrong way round. How flipping mortifying.
Right.
Sorry to you and
okay.
your incredible team that you work with. The People Experience Hub, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, who I've avidly follow now as well with your influence and love everything.
We do memes. We really like. There aren't that many B2B memes you can get away with, but we do it.
That's a reason to like follow and engage with you if nothing else. But yes, fab. We'll add all your details into our show notes, Ted, so people can find you, and obviously the accurate name of the business that you work for. And just thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Ted.
We are coming to the end of today's episode where we've been chatting to Ted Hewett about employee engagement. We hope you're now curious and feeling informed from our chat with him today. So here are his tips and recommendations as shared with us during our conversation. Tip number one, there were so many great tips here, we've had to consolidate them. But tip number one is a question, which is, what are the outcomes you want to drive from arranging your own employer engagement survey or set of questions? What do you want to achieve from doing it? Number two, actively listen to your people. Really seek to understand what they think and how they're feeling. Number three, empathize with others' worlds. Everyone has different experiences. The spectrum is large. So it's about really, truly trying to empathize with that. And lastly, do something with it. Take action. Don't ask the questions if you're not prepared to listen to the answers and actually do something different. If you enjoyed this episode around employee engagement, then check out our other episode where we spoke to guest Rob Stevenson about wellbeing and mental health in the workplace, which was back in 2021, but is still such a relevant conversation and really relates beautifully to this chat we've had with Ted about employee engagement. So if you're interested in that previous historical episode with Rob, it is episode 9 in season 2, and you can find that wherever you find us, essentially, and wherever you listen to your podcast episodes. And actually, talking of episodes, we will have another brand new one for you in early June when we're going to explore the topic of quiet thriving. Fancy.
Very. CVBs, we know you're super busy. It would mean the world to us if you could just take 1 minute to rate, review, and subscribe to the Old Coaching Cast wherever you listen. It helps the podcast more than you know, and it means you don't have to worry about remembering to download it either.
We like to end each episode of the podcast with our personal song recommendation, giving you energy and motivation as you launch into the next part of your working day. It's my choice this week, and I have chosen the new track by London Grammar called House, which is so good. I absolutely love it. I heard it a few weeks ago, and I literally had it on repeat in my car. It has like
I've not heard it.
Oh, it's so good, Suzy. I think you will love it. It's got a slight. Now, I'm going to sound really uncool when I say this. I think it has a slight drum and bass feel to it, and I'm a drum and bass fan. I'd say it's more like a chilled drum and bass beat in the background, but I'm sure many of you who are music enthusiasts will be cringing and rolling around thinking, what the hell is she talking about? She hasn't got a Scooby-Doo. So if that is not technically correct, I apologise, but whatever, it's a tune. So yeah, House, London Grammar, so good. They've got a new album coming out. I don't work for their PR company or music label, but I'm just saying I'm really excited about it. So yeah, go stick it on. Thank you so much for listening, CBBS. Really appreciate you being here as always. And remember, you've got this.